Hello, Internet. Hi, how are you? My name's Evan Jones. I'm the community manager for Pursuitery.com, social media Geekout. Join us online at Pursuitery.com for a full listing of Geekouts, challenges, and more. We'd love to have you. If you have any questions today, please feel free to tweet them to us at Pursuitery. I'll work them into our discussion at the end of the mix. Today's going to be a really good one. This video will also be posted to our YouTube channel if you can't stay for the whole thing. But I recommend you stay for the whole thing because it's going to be fantastic. So let me do a quick introduction here as I speed through the quickest intro in Pursuitery history. Ladies and gentlemen, Heather Saldonia. Heather, did I get the pronunciation right?
Yes, Soldonia. You're right, Evan.
All right. Heather will be joining us today from somewhere in the West Coastal area. I never get specific. San Francisco Bay Area. I actually never get specific about locations, or I try not to get specific about locations because I want people to feel that they have the warmth and privacy that we try to provide on Pursuitery. Well, privacy up to a certain point. And we're going to be talking about social media and community management. I'd like to read Heather's bio here because it's both complex and fascinating and thrilling, and we're old friends from our time at a certain university in the Los Angeles area. I like this vagueness. How do you feel about that?
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. Sitting next to me on my left, as you can see, is John. Check this out, everybody. Here, check this out. And that's the beauty of internet technology and the beauty of Pursuitery. So let's go ahead and then read Heather's bio. Our guest today is the owner of VR Footprints, a boutique agency providing public relations services to small businesses and startups. She also contracts with large corporations to support their community management and social media strategy needs. Her background includes working on content and community management for Old Navy, Chevron, Charles Schwab, the Delta Dental Insurance Company, the National Association of Realtors, and others. And we've cooked up a few questions today for Heather, who has been good enough to give us some time, and we're just going to kind of talk about the basics of social media and kind of what you need to know about getting your community started online and communicating with others online, whether you're, say, a communicator, teacher, community member of general standing, or you've got a more specific goal. Going on with our introductions, sitting to my left, as you've already found out, is Mr. How do I pronounce it? John Barlone.
That's perfect.
All right. It's so much cooler than Evan Jones, but so much cooler than Evan Jones in so many ways. John, you are the community manager for the CA Alliance?
The Connected Learning Alliance, that is correct, sir.
And if anybody's wondering, the Connected Learning Alliance is the umbrella under which Pursuitery is situated. It took me a long time to find the verb situated. I do apologize, but I want to have the right one at you. I'd like to think this is NPR for people who like Twitter. And so John's always a blast to have around, and it's a pleasure to have him on. We've been waiting to find an excuse to just kind of like take a break from our work schedules because we work in the same building and talk about social media, and there we go. And further to the left, and switching cameras here, prepare your faux hawk, sir. Mr. Jameson Pond. Jameson is the community manager for the DML Research Hub.
That's right.
Excellent. And it's another member of the Connected Learning Alliance family. There's a variety of relations here. It's very much like a spider web and very much like a group of Peter Parkers and Mary Jane Watsons here. But with that said, the introduction's out of the way. Everybody who's watching online, you can tweet us at Pursuitery, and we will answer all your questions towards the tail end of today's interview. I have been advised, Heather was good enough to let me know because she's really busy, that she has a hard stop at 3:45. It is now 3:08 on my watch, so I think we'll be pretty good with this. We have a whole lot of questions to work through. And I just want to get us all on the record about social media and community management. There's important stuff for communities, educators, and businesses alike, and it's a really interesting place. We're joined by such impressive guests today and people who have a professional background in social media and community management, so I figured we'd just go ahead and have an open discussion about this, with Heather being the lead subject and all the rest of us kind of piling on as we see fit, because she is the crazy, crazy, crazy professional.
Thanks,
And made the time. So I meant that in a good way.
Yes. Thank you.
Absolutely no pejorative there. So, question number one. Let's say I'm a teacher or a business person. How do I get started with social media?
Well, we've all heard about personal brand and online reputation. My advice to everybody is always just start assuming that everything you post is going to be public. That's my personal rule. And, you know, you're going to have to define your boundaries and your level or degree of privacy and professionalism, and then kind of work from there. So whether that means you just want to be sharing your professional, you know, resume if you're a professor, and, you know, making sure that your CV is in all the right places like LinkedIn or, you know, Review or About Me, or whether you actually want to be on Twitter sharing your actual insights or opinions. It's really going to be based on your degree of professionalism and privacy.
Okay. John, you have anything to say?
Yeah, if you want to switch over.
If I want to point the mic and the camera at you, because we're in the same room. Yeah.
That's all good. I would say that it's two really different animals in terms of using social media as a teacher versus using social media as a business person. From my experience being, you know, brought up and immersed in a community of teachers, you know, family-wise, friend-wise, and also with the work we're doing now at the Connected Learning Alliance, I see a lot of teachers using social media for just professional development, for trying to find other people like them who are trying to do the same things or have the same kind of questions. So using social media that way, it's a little bit more like, okay, jump on Twitter, start following people, and start talking to people, versus, you know, business, it's usually having to try and incorporate social media into what your business goals are, what your game plan is, figuring out, you know, why you want to use social media. So it's a little bit more formal and strict there. So I would say using it for an individual or a personal level, it's a lot easier and a lot more fun.
All right. Trying to see if Jameson, have you timed out? Oh. See, I was seeing if you had anything to add, but I thought for a second that you went blurry, and I thought your connection died. Did you have anything to add to that?
Sorry, you guys are cutting out right now. I'm trying to close out some applications here so that I can actually hear and then join the conversation. So here, just give me a second here.
All right. That's cool. Actually, you can always comment in the chat, and I can read out loud. I am going to go one step further here and adjust another technical issue. Everybody, get ready to see something funny. I realize that the air conditioner is starting to pick up on the camera, so I was getting a little confused. All right, so if I can pull rank as the host and add my own 2 cents as far as getting started with social media, I think it's a question of sort of designing to the end, and that's when I used to work as a consultant. I also used to work as somebody that was just brought in to literally look at people's reports, and I would always say, like, what was your ultimate goal? Are you trying to get famous? And to you, what does famous mean? Because ultimately you're talking about some kind of business transaction at the end of it. In other terms, do you want a whole bunch of followers? Are you working on a specific project or plan? Do you have a timeline? Do you have a transactional need? Are you basically trying to get money from people? Are you trying to get attention for your cause? And so it's a question of really planning out not only what you wanted to be at the end of it and what the end goal was, but also where you want to be and how much time you wanted to devote to it and what your goal was. And if you had it's going to be a funny term to use on an educational technology website, but marketing funnel is basically what they say to it. Like, I posted something to Twitter, people were into it, they clicked on the link, and then I got email notice or I got a phone call. That's very common. That is how it goes, and that's how I try to advise people about getting started with social media, is sort of know what you want to do. And as per Heather's point, very true. If you've put it out there, it's going to be out there. For instance, I view Twitter as, and this actually came from my job interview at a certain place called Pursuitery.com. I try to be very honest on my Twitter, but I also know that there's certain things where it's like shockingly honest and brutal and just okay, that's a bit too much, and I also know I have an opinion that may be controversial, but I want to have it be well worded and well presented, so it's not necessarily just this ugly big ball of dissent. And that's actually a really good boundary to set, and obviously every situation will be different, but that's how I advise people to get started on social media, is figure out where you want to be and what you want to do and where you want to go. So, Heather, if we could pick your brain again. Guru.
Go for it.
All right. All right, coming all the way live from the San Francisco Bay Area. Since there's such a lot of platforms out there, and if we want to, we can start naming platforms. We had a rough estimate that we could do 5 minutes of platform naming.
Probably.
My point being, how do you decide where to be? Since you can't be everywhere if you're a small concern or a small classroom or a group of people. With so many options for social media, how do you decide where you want to be?
So my number one piece of advice to clients is quality over quantity. If you're a small business or a small group and you're only able to really allocate the time that it's going to require to be present on 1 or 2 channels, then you should absolutely be present on those 1 or 2 channels at the most robust level that you can manage, rather than being only remotely, randomly present on 3 or 4 platforms. So with that to consider, really analyze your audience and target market to just kind of identify where they frequent most. So, if it's a classroom, maybe that means you're going to be focused more on groups. If it's B2B, maybe you're going to be a little bit more on Twitter or LinkedIn. So it's really, like you said, your goals matched with your time, and really trying to maximize where you are, but having quality considerations.
Okay, and B2B means?
Business to business.
See, we've already picked up some jargon, man. Learning stuff.
Today I learned.
Today I learned. TAL. Okay, so, John, do you have any follow-up on that?
Yeah, sure. So to Heather's point, yeah, you can't really be everywhere. We know there are like new social networks and social platforms coming out all the time, and even the definition, I mean, some people would consider blogs to be part of social media, and that gets into a whole kind of other can of worms. So you shouldn't be everywhere, and you couldn't possibly be everywhere all the time. And I think it's also a question of, in my own experience, when people have asked me that same question, they're usually thinking about the time that they have to put into posting content. That's usually kind of the number one personal concern, like how could I possibly keep up a Twitter feed and a Facebook feed and a YouTube channel, et cetera, but there's also the listening aspect too. So it's not, I think we all know, and we would all say this, social media isn't just a place where you can blast out. It's a place where you also have to listen. So that's kind of the second side of the coin there when determining like how many different places are you going to get involved in. It's the talking aspect and also the listening aspect too.
Good point. Jameson, did you have any follow-up? Or are you still having connection issues?
It's getting better. I don't know. Yeah, pretty much what John and Heather are saying. Don't spread yourself too thin. Like my last position, my boss wanted us to be on every social networking, social media site possible, and we just didn't have the time to actually spend really devoting to all of them. And we finally learned to just kind of drop some of them, but in the beginning, it was just such a mess because we couldn't devote any real quality time to, any of them because we were just spending just a few moments on each of them because we were just jumping around too much. So, like what Heather's saying, just focus really on where the core group is, like where you can actually have real discussions and where you can get the most use.
Bang for your buck, as it were, could be a description. I also think your point John's point, I'm pointing at John when you see this because we're in the same room. I just think it's funny. Building on your point, where it's something where you're listening as well as speaking, that's really important. It is a broadcast, but it's a broadcast with narrowcast possibilities. That's how I view social media. And people can answer you, and people can disagree, or they can agree, or you could make friends, or you could end up alienating people. It's one of the things that's really great about it, but the understanding is if you're just kind of pushing ads or pushing links or pushing noise at people, after a while it's like, well, what do I get for this? I mean, how often do I have to hear reminders about what a great organization yours is or what an awesome person you are? Let's see what that interconnectivity is like. And at Pursuitery, as well as at the Connected Learning Alliance, it's a big thing where we want to have the conversation, we're aiming to have the conversation, and we're not interested in the one way. But you have to spend that time listening instead of and not just pushing it out there. I get up and I think Monday is usually tweet scheduling day. It's where I find the interesting stuff that I want to seed in. But the rest of the time, we specifically rely on Twitter pretty heavily. The rest of the time, though, I'm keeping Twitter open and seeing like who's talking to us and replying to things and instant mentioning people and asking them to email me. It is very much a conversation facilitator and not just a conversation broadcaster. So that's, again, me piling on with the point there after everybody else talks, but that's what the host does. Moving on! So question number 3, and this is a solid point. Heather, you sort of spoke to this. How about planning? How do you approach planning for social media?
So for me, I would say planning and strategy are pretty much the same thing, and I think both need to be dynamic and very fluid. So if you find that certain topics are driving conversations in your community, you're going to obviously change up your plan and your strategy to accommodate that and blossom, foster it. So have a plan, but make sure that it's adjustable.
Well, plans change, right?
Yeah. And you have to really embrace it. And hopefully you have a team that's, thinks on their toes and is willing to react quickly and, not change averse. That's a bad thing in social media.
Change averse. So between B2B and change averse, we're gonna start a counter for how impressive we're gonna sound at all these group meetings. And John, I think this is gonna be pretty good.
We need a double.
I did actually use ROI at a group meeting this week, but I used it correctly, I think, when I referred to our coworker Roy. Get it? It's okay. John, do you have anything to add, sir?
I was just gonna see if you had a little bit of clarification on what all you meant by planning.
Me.
Yes.
As I move the camera and the microphone back. Well, when I specifically meant in terms of, okay, I have a social media strategy in that I'm on these platforms, and planning is a very broad term in that sense. And so planning would be how I'm mapping out my social media strategy overall, as well as here's the day-to-day, here's even as far as the hour-to-hour, and when you get really extreme with this stuff, I mean, when you work in a professional capacity, I've mapped things down to like what hour things did best. People are coming back from lunch, probably not going to do a lot of heavy content that time period. Those are the kind of concerns that you have. Obviously, it's going to be different. Every situation is going to be different. Part of this is we were talking about stuff that we have so many educators coming on the sites and we have so many students coming on the sites that your test cases, as it were, are going to be different. But basically sitting down and figuring out how you're going to plan for the goal that you're trying to accomplish that I mentioned in step 1. Your goal can always be something simple as well. I want to get to X amount of followers so people know about what we're doing. Okay, so planning-wise, that's where you start breaking down how do you get to that goal. So, does that clarify?
Yeah. So there's a ton of stuff out there already on the internet that I don't know that I could do a much better job than Jeremiah Aoyang and we can probably include that in the archive somewhere in terms of spelling, but he has a really cool graphic. It's called the social media ROI pyramid, and I found that really, really helpful early. Think like, okay, how do you take the growth in your, say, your Twitter account and match that up with what business goals are and what business strategies are. That was really helpful in terms of laying out terminology and figuring out how these small up into these bigger company metrics. So definitely checking that out. Otherwise, I think Heather, you touched on a really good point of having executive buy-in and having them kind of sign off on whatever strategy or planning you're coming up with, making sure that it matches up with maybe it's your marketing department goals, your sales department goals, your public relation department goals, and just having kind of the suits buy into whatever you're planning and making sure it's all integrated is another big part of it too.
Jameson, did you have anything to add? I know you're dealing with connection issues, so I'm trying to go easy on your internet.
Yeah. My connection, it's getting better. It still cuts out here and there, but I guess when it comes to planning, I guess one, I've learned quite a bit from John. John was my teacher, but other than that, I like to, I like to find those that are doing social media well within the field, and then I kind of watch what they're doing, how they're doing it, what's working for them, what's not. And I'm a big fan of analytics, so on a pretty regular basis, I like to look at Twitter analytics or Google analytics and see what time of days are actually working for engagement. And I just kind of I'm always kind of adjusting my plan, on a day-to-day basis. I may try something different. I may tweet at a later time or at a different time. So it's basically just always trying something new, always being willing to try something else. So that's really kind of the big, I guess, the core of my planning when it comes to social media.
With that said, getting to a bit more of a granular level, do you keep a content calendar, Heather? Do you have, this is what I'm doing day by day or hour by hour for your clients?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer. I absolutely use content calendars. And then try to sprinkle in as much real-time trending topics as possible. If you can get the marketing campaigns quarterly plan for whatever sales they're going to have, or whatever open enrollment is coming up, any of their initiatives, so that you can build that into your content calendar. I know companies that do a month-long calendar. I prefer a bi-weekly or just every week, to just try to keep things as fresh as possible. There's always compliance restrictions with certain clients, so maybe you're limited to their content, that's been approved by their legal department or wherever. But then there's also clients that are totally open and they want you to pull in sources that are specific to their industry. So, you just kind of work within the content that you can and then try to build on it in real time as much as possible to be as engaging and interesting to your audience. That's my approach.
It's a good point and a very strong one. I was going to note something that John had mentioned earlier, and you brought up, specifically talking about the various departments in planning, that social media on a professional basis, meaning that when you're working on, say, content for a marketing company or something like that, it's really interesting because it's this interstitial position that brings all these things together. You're acting as something that, in my case, can be the frontline outreach department for communications, marketing, editorial, and even human resources. And so you're sort of lending yourself to all these all these departments, all these people, and all these bosses, and oftentimes you'll see that they have slightly differing positions or sometimes almost contradictory ones that you're trying to address. And I think for the educators out there watching this, I certainly know that administrative duties are often drastically different from your day-to-day teaching duties. So handling all that stuff and getting it all together in the right place, it's a really fine balancing act, and again, it's part of why the planning is so important, as well as the content planning on a quicker basis. And John, would you like to read this quote? Because I was going to give you the floor anyway, and it's pretty great.
Okay.
All right. So let me.
Yeah, and I wish I could remember where exactly I heard this, where exactly I read this, but it's been said that a good community manager is an ombudsman between what the company wants and what the customer wants. And so, like Evan mentioned, there are so many different branches to a company usually, and you're kind of that one, point between all those different branches and your actual customers and the audience out there.
Mm-hmm.
Jameson, anything to add in the round robin? And got very quiet.
Yeah, we can see you,
Yeah.
Jameson.
Yes, we can see you.
Oh, sorry. I don't know. You guys cut out there for a second.
I thought you were reading a radar map. You looked all kinds of intense. I thought you were guiding some
well,
aircraft
all of
into
you guys
some
just
form of field somewhere.
froze, and I was like, "What's going on here?" So I'm sorry. I did not catch your question.
Oh, I was just saying if you had anything to add. If you're having connection problems, you can just always put it in the chat and I'll read it off or whatever.
All right. I don't know why I'm having such issues.
Oof. So, Heather, I've a specific question for you because we've got like 10 more minutes, 13 or 14 more minutes of your time left. So I wanted to address some industry-specific questions for you from your position as a guru. And that is how I'm referring to you. And that's how I'm referring to you from now on.
Oh, God.
You've entered the guru stage. Yep. I was wondering, what's the first thing you do when somebody brings you in as a consultant or a contractor to work on their social media?
I almost always start with the analytics. To Jameson's point, I think you can always start there, analyze what content performs well, what the audience responds to. Maybe you can do a little bit more of that. Maybe you can do a little less of that. I also like to just kind of gauge where they're at with their tone. Do they have an established tone and voice, or is that something they're trying to develop? Who are the decision makers? Who are the, like John was saying, who needs to buy in to this plan and the strategy? Who's going to be limiting the process? Those types of things. Compliance considerations, there's financial industries, there's HIPAA restrictions and regulations, but by and large, it's all the same. When you go in, you just kind of try to assess what the existing presence is and, what you're there for.
John, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I would say along those same lines, research is usually priority number one. And one of the questions I've always liked to reflect back onto people is try and figure out, before they made the call for a consultant, like what were the conversations they were having about why they wanted to get involved in social media. There can be lots of different reasons from a business standpoint. It could be they want to generate sales leads. It could be they want to connect with their customer base more. And figuring out those reasons will usually help a lot in determining what a good strategy would be versus, okay, we're going to get you on platforms XYZ right away and produce all this content, but maybe not necessarily know exactly what they're going after.
And Jameson, to answer your question there, basically was asking, what's the first thing you do when somebody brings you in to discuss working on their social media, or it's just somebody's offering a helping hand?
I think just like what Heather was saying, kind of looking at the data, seeing what it says, and I don't know, just trying to get an overview of what they're trying to accomplish and what's actually going on with their social media at the time.
So Heather, since you've worked in a variety of industries and fields, I was going to ask, do you see a big difference between the areas you're working in and the verticals you're working in? And yes, I did do the hand quote thing for verticals. Do the same basic principles apply to everyone as far as social media?
I think by and large, every client and company, whether they're an individual entrepreneur, a small business of 10 people, or a very established, long-standing company, I think everyone across the board is scared of misstepping, saying something that flares a negative conversation about them, and so I think that even though the topics and interests might be different, I think really the core concerns and resistance towards being online and having a social media presence are pretty consistent. So, as companies become more familiar and more comfortable with that, it's a good thing, but it's still pretty significant,
Actually, building on this one, I do have a quick follow-up. How do you advise people to avoid issues? Because there's so many ways where something can get kind of odd and hard to deal with.
Yeah. So I think my biggest advice to people is always be prepared to monitor for for a crisis to start happening. Have prepared messages in response, but the most important thing is to just know when to and when not to engage. I would say probably 98% of the time, just don't engage. If it's a really hot topic, if it's something that can be mitigated, like a customer service issue, that's one thing. But if it's really developing into a crisis, it's better to step back and assess the situation and have a thoroughly thought through and well-developed response.
That's coming.
I'm sorry. We heard this odd noise in here. We're in a separate special room today, and they're doing construction behind us, and we kept hearing this sound like almost a snake rattling in the room. And so both John and I were sitting here looking under the desk, terrified. Turns out they're just carrying a cable across the street.
We're safe.
Yeah, I think we're safe. I hope.
I hope so too.
Crossed. Yeah. No. With that said, I think tone's a really important part of this, and there's this that everybody has in terms of social. I know there's a lot of experience on this call, and each one of us have seen kind of different worlds and different aspects of it. But I think tone's a really important part of it, and one business or organization or group or educational organization in our case is going to have a different tone or approach to another one. Like, I know for the sake of Pursuitery, we're basically having a blast most of the time. Whereas I think we're really trying to get that kind of have a good time, just mess about, geek out vibe going, and keep that going. Whereas if you work for, say, this is one of the last places I worked where I was doing the analytics reports for a cancer treatment facility. That's an entirely different thing, like as far as like what kind of information you're putting out there and how you're providing it. So it's a really interesting to see how what you put out and how you put it out engages people in certain different ways. So being aware of that probably is a big part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think once brands step outside of the expected tone that, the public expects from them, that's where it becomes a problem and a potential crisis. So, just always being conscious of how the public perceives your brand, what they expect to hear from you. Obviously, it should always tie into your service or, what you do. So, but yeah, I think that's probably the best rule is to be consistent with your tone.
All right, John, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, and I would say in addition to knowing whether or not you can have a personal tone, I think one of the major ways I've seen a lot of brands and a lot of big name companies or even just companies you wouldn't expect to be more informal get around that issue is on Twitter specifically. I've seen this, but it could be played out in a number of other platforms, is just saying in the bio or in the background image, like these are the actual people behind this Twitter account, or introducing you to the people in charge of social media and saying, you know what, yes, this is XYZ brand, but Jameson is the one tweeting, and maybe he has little initials saying this is from Jameson or something like that. That's a really easy way to kind of add a personal touch. I also think it's going to be a growing trend of a little bit more first person, a little bit more personal voice coming from brands. I think we saw that happening a lot with sports in the last couple of years. The Los Angeles Kings hockey accounts as kind of one big major
It's a great account.
major example of that. Yeah, the guy Pat behind it is really fun. So he kind of pioneered for that particular industry a little bit. Even recent DiGiorno's Pizza, which kind of going back to what Heather was talking about, they engaged when they probably shouldn't have engaged by using a hashtag about domestic violence, not really understanding what the hashtag was, and tried to relate it to pizza. Bad idea in hindsight, but as a follow-up, it was very much first person, like I am really sorry, I made a mistake, versus trying to blame it on an intern or something like that. I think we're going to see first person voice happening more and more with brands.
So, quick follow-up. Jameson had a question here I want to make sure you got to, Heather. What if you're engaged in a somewhat negative leaning discussion with somebody and the person doesn't stop with the messages?
Yeah, so there's always going to be one of those customers. I mean, you hope that not always, but there often are. And so generally the community manager is already familiar with that person, at least maybe having not engaged with them, but they're familiar with who that person is. Try to do some recon, find out if there's something that you can actually resolve for them. But I think to that note, it's really important to have your community rules available somewhere, whether that's a small link on your Twitter profile or the Facebook About section, so that you can speak to that, and you've already disclosed it, and so you can say, you're violating the rules of this community as we've shared here, and so we're going to block you, or, we're going to delete your post and block you. So that's something that I didn't mention before, but it's a really good thing to do, is to have your community rules posted and available somewhere, so in the event that someone is really just being harassing to your community, that you can get rid of them in a PC, completely appropriate way.
Okay, that's a really good point. I'm actually gonna go ahead and steal that. We have 2 more minutes of your time, so I did want to ask you a really quick question. Well, first off, I want to thank you for your time. Really do appreciate it. It's been great to see you and catch up. I know you've got a very busy schedule going on. But what big social trend do you expect to see in the future, Heather?
Brand advocacy, whether that's using employees to advocate for your brand, if it's insurance, then maybe it'll be your sales force. Whether it's financial, maybe it'll be your advisors, but also influencers. So I worked with a small shop whiskey label, and we reached out to lifestyle bloggers for them, and in their specific geographic areas that they would be expanding to. So I think just the opportunity to, like John was saying, have individuals, and individual opinions advocate for you. So I think along those lines.
Okay, well, I'm going to take myself a swig of Starbucks coffee, which we have here at the office.
Oh, jealous.
Taste that richness. And thank you for joining us today. It's always great to see you again. We know that you snuck in some time there for us, and we do appreciate it. We've learned a lot. Have a great day, and I believe we're just going to start wrapping up between the three of us.
Okay.
Bye, Heather.
Thanks,
Thank you so
nice
much.
meeting you.
Yep.
Nice to
VR
see
Footprints, yes?
Yes, at VR Footprints.
At
Thanks,
VR Footprints
guys.
if you want.
Yeah.
Take care, okay?
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Good friends just popping in right fast. So that's basically it. Did you have any stuff that you want to wrap up, John or Jameson? Oh,
Very good.
We covered a whole bunch of ground there. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We really do appreciate it. It's always nice to see everyone. It's always nice to get feedback. And I want to remind everybody to stop by Pursuitery.com. We are beginning our fall programming very soon, and I have one word for everybody out there, and I know it's going to excite a lot of people, and that word is Minecraft. We are going to be doing a whole lot of digging and a whole lot of punching trees, and it's going to be very exciting. So feel free to get on Pursuitery.com and jump in. Camp Minecraft 2.0 is starting next week, and we're very, very excited. If anybody have any closing thoughts, I'll go ahead and open up the floor now. You can discuss it via the voice thing, or we can do it via chat, but otherwise, that'll be it for today. John, Jameson, anything to add?
I'm good.
All right, well, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon on Pursuitery.com. Take care. Wait. We've got to all do the freeze frame while I turn the broadcast off. It's right in my face. Oh.